So one side is cast as a corrupt liar, and the other a lying sexual transgressor. Well, you know I'm talking about 1884, and Blaine, the continental liar from the state of Maine against Ma, where's my pa? One thing that we learned from that year was that once you impugn the integrity of the other side, issue distinctions go by the wayside because you can't trust someone who's a liar to tell you what they're going to do when they govern. Incivility displaces issue substance. Let's look at an example from 1968. Here, the substance is a principal distinction about the war in Vietnam.
You must realize what some of the political issues are here. That many people in the United States happen to believe that the United States policy is wrong in Vietnam. But I assume that the point of the American democracy is you can express any point of view you want. Shut up a minute.
No, I won't.
And as far as I'm concerned, the only sort of pro-crypto-Nazi I can think of is yourself. Failing that,
listen, you
the right of assembly...
Stop calling me a crypto-Nazi.
Let's stop calling names.
You in your goddamn face, and you'll stay plastered.
Now, there's a pattern there. Interruption gives way to attempts to silence, gives way to name-calling. Name-calling breeds name-calling because we mirror, and then we escalate. You've ultimately got a threat to violence. But here's a question. These are folks you probably don't know, although they are the leading intellectuals of their day. And so you probably aren't taking sides in this and more likely to say, well, one of them is really the guilty party. But what about candidates now, as we're about to vote, when the candidate who's engaging in inappropriate discourse is on our side? I'd like you to ask that question as I show illustrations from this year's election and contrast to points in the recent past. To ask the question, is it worse now? The answer is going to be yes. First, let's look at indications of rudeness. And I'm going to use as my example vice presidential debates.
Very important issue, Bernie. Maybe we could extend on education for a moment.
You're asking me to invoke the moderator's discretion
I am
on further
asking you to
discussion?
invoke the moderator's discussion. Yes, sir, discretion.
It is so granted.
Thank you, sir.
It makes us more weak. It projects weakness, and when we look weak, our adversaries are much more willing to test us. They're more brazen in their attacks, and our allies are less willing to
With
trust
all
us.
due respect, that's a bunch of malarkey.
And why is that so?
Because not a single thing he said is accurate. This is a bunch of stuff. Look, here's the deal.
What does that mean, a bunch of stuff?
Well, it means it's simply inaccurate.
It's Irish.
It is. We Irish call it malarkey.
Thanks for the translation.
No,
Okay.
We Irish call it malarkey. But last thing.
And paid few taxes and lost $1 billion a year.
Ukraine, or now their heavy-handed approach?
Their
heavy-handed approach?
You both have said Vladimir Putin is a better
Gentlemen, we're going to
leader
get to
than the
Russia
president.
in just a moment.
We're going to reform the immigration system that we have,
just
where
have to
people
correct
can come
Governor
in.
Pence.
She shouldn't have said half.
Governor, this is Senator Kane's 2 minutes, please.
Yeah, that's right. So now we're even.
Yeah.
Look.
Did you get any issue distinctions out of that? Talking over each other, interrupting? Well, the audience gave us a verdict. This debate is notable for the fact that audiences fled it in record numbers. That is, they tuned in and then they went away. Let's look at another indicator, guilt by association. There's the definition, and I'm going to look at two instances. In both cases, the attacked candidate had been endorsed by an influential member of the Ku Klux Klan. In both cases, the campaign that's being attacked had rejected the endorsement. But in the first case, 1964, Lyndon Johnson against Barry Goldwater, the ad, very expensive ad, was produced but never aired. They feared a backlash. They feared the public would recognize guilt by association. But look at the contrast in 2016. The piece I'm going to show there is posted online.
We represent the majority of the people in Alabama who hate niggerism, Catholicism, Judaism, and all the isms of the whole world. So said Robert Creel of the Alabama Ku Klux Klan. He also said, I like Barry Goldwater. He needs our help. Vote for President Johnson on November 3rd.
The reason a lot of Klan members like Donald Trump is because a lot of what he believes, we believe in.
Third category, lying. It's really difficult to prove that someone is lying because lying is deliberate, intentional deception. And once you call someone a liar, as I noted earlier, there's no point in believing their issue distinctions because you don't know what a liar is actually going to do. So let's look at lie and lying in 2004, a presidential debate, the uses of the term, and also in 2016.
Senator Kerry, 2 minutes. You've repeatedly accused President Bush, not here tonight, but elsewhere before, of not telling the truth about Iraq, essentially of lying to the American people about Iraq. Give us some examples of what you consider to be his not telling the truth.
Well, I've never ever used the harshest word, as you did just then, and I try not to. Now, he misled the American people in his speech. He misled the American people when he said we'd go to war as a last resort.
She got caught in a total lie, and she lied. Okay, Honest Abe never lied. That's the good thing. That's the big difference between Abraham Lincoln and you. And by the way, at the last debate, she lied. They actually said that she lied, okay, and she lied, but she's lied about a lot of things.
Difference in degree, difference in kind. So I asked the question earlier, are you able to see instances in which the candidate you favor is doing things that are inappropriate? Well, it's much more difficult to actually do that in today's media environment, because as we increasingly enclave into partisan media silos, what we see is those on the right point out all the instances of incivility on the left, and those on the left do the exact reverse. Let me show you an example.
As we reported last night, Congressman Alan Grayson, a Democrat from Orlando, Florida, has said a number of irresponsible things. The latest outrage, calling this female lobbyist a whore.
Let me finish tonight with this. Even Hitler thought it more important to get to Paris. Well, that was a Texas congressman's nasty knock, of course, on President Obama for his failure to attend the big rally in France this past weekend. Wouldn't it be good for the country if politicians dropped the whole Hitler thing and returned to saying, well, we Republicans and those Democrats just have an honest disagreement on some big stuff?
Yes, it would. But it would also be better if we recognized when our own side did the same thing and policed it. Well, do they? We conducted a study at the Annenberg Public Policy Center, and we looked for instances that were very close on the left and the right. We found them. We found Hitler signs being used to identify Scott Walker in Wisconsin, Republican. Hitler signs tied to Barack Obama attacking the Affordable Care Act. We find instances in which those on the left said about women they disagreed with on the right, she's a talk slut or she's a whore. And we found instances in the legislature in which people on both sides talked about legislation sponsored by those of opposing view and said that legislation means people are going to die. So we had paired instances and we asked how were they covered. Consistent with the prediction, those on the right, Fox News, condemned those on the left. Those on the left, MSNBC, condemned those on the right, but both sides downplayed or ignored those on the same side. Now what does that do? It increases the likelihood that you think that there's more incivility than there actually is because those instances are played and replayed and replayed. But it also suggests that we know where the blame lies, but it doesn't lie with us. And if that other side is transgressing routinely, well, shouldn't it be okay to engage in the same thing? After all, remember the playground axiom, hey, they started it. In this kind of environment, what can we do? Well, the first is we can recognize when our own side transgresses, and we can call them out for it. Candidates should police their own side.
I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No, ma'am. He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues.
You heard about this phenomenon, Bernie bros, people who support you and sometimes attack in very crude and sexist ways.
I have heard about it. It's disgusting. Look, we don't want that crap.
Thank you, Senators McCain and Sanders. We also can institutionally police our own side, and the first instance here is really important. The Republicans are in control of the House. The Republican congressman who's charging incumbent President Bill Clinton, a Democrat, of treason is taken down. That is formally censured by a House controlled by the Republicans.
Clinton gave aid and comfort to the enemy.
Precedents of the House, the words of the Speaker were out of order, and without objection, the words will be stricken from the record.
The reforms I'm proposing would not apply to those who are here illegal.
Well, I last night heard from the leadership that they
wanted me to contact the White House and state that my statements were inappropriate. I did.
We can also increase the likelihood that we reserve the language that questions integrity or impugns patriotism for the real thing. And this cartoon illustrates what the real thing might look like. We also can protect deliberative space by following Jefferson's rules. Jefferson's rules for the House of Representatives basically say, attack the position, attack the policy, but don't impugn the integrity. Don't impugn the person, don't attack the person on the other side. It's a pretty good rule, and Wikipedia adopts it. But I'd like to make one change in the Wikipedia listing because one word up there is used to disparage those with mental retardation. And I think in our discourse, we ought to say what is comfortable and take accountability for our own words, and I want that word changed. So I'm going to say, I like this statement as long as you say, someone may very well be a fool, but telling them so is neither going to increase their intelligence nor improve their ability to communicate with them. And finally, we need to monitor our own communication and hold ourselves accountable. Here's the Vice President doing that.
Your appraisal of the passage of the Affordable Care Act will go down in history. You said it was a big something deal, I believe.
By the way, a reporter read my lips. I whispered in the President's ear, and thank God my mother wasn't around.
Now notice, the Vice President isn't repeating the offensive language, and he's indicating he's not proud of it. Despite all these discourse-protecting moves, this is a worse year than in the recent past, and by some measures, and I haven't pointed to those, worse than any time in the history of the Republic. But before we become depressed and file for papers to go to Canada, we might put this in some historical context. Let's look at Mama, Where's My Pa, and carry ourselves all the way to the present day. Here's what's historically true. Most of our leaders, most of the time, have engaged the issue, sometimes viciously, sometimes in a highly partisan and divisive fashion, but engaged the issues. They haven't attacked the integrity or impugned the patriotism of those with whom they disagree. We found that in our study in 2012. I showed you the bad instances, and they are Hitler analogies, slut. You'll die if this legislation is passed, but those are rare. They are an aberration, and we need to keep that in mind. But there have been periods in our history in which, boy, did we go off the rails. We went off the rails during the McCarthy era. Some of you remember Senator McCarthy, and those who don't will remember studying him. This is a U.S. senator who used the powers of his office to take a congressional committee against Americans whose patriotism and integrity and loyalty to country was questioned without anything that would reasonably be called evidence. We finally got out of that period. Our system was resilient, and we stepped back and we said, we're going to call that thing something. We're going to call that McCarthyism, and we're going to teach that label in our schools so that we're going to increase the likelihood that we spot it if we ever see it again, and we decrease the likelihood that we will ever go to that dark place. That moment is an important moment in our history, and it tells us about something that I think we should draw as a lesson. Because after this dismal 2016 campaign, I think we need to step back, and those of us who care about the discourse of the country and the ways in which it can protect our democratic institutions need to ask two important questions. First, what could we have done differently in 2016 to raise the level of discourse and minimize some of these problematic, norm-breaking instances? And secondly, a difficult but important question, how can we best identify, assess, and discuss personal characteristics and habits of mind that affect how a candidate would govern? If we find good answers to those questions, we will increase the likelihood that when successive generations look back on 2016 and its extreme discourse and its norm-breaking excesses, they will say that 2016 was an aberration. It wasn't the new normal. Thank you.